Welcome to Celeb Scene Central. The Boys Season 4 has been upping its ante with gross lobotomies, superpowered livestock, and an unexpected superhuman centipede, but last week's release might just be the show's most uncomfortable outing yet. Complete with a questionably long torture scene involving Huey, Jack Quaid, in Tech Knights, Derek Wilson, Sex Dungeon and Homelanders, Anthony Starr, long-awaited reunion with his love of breastfeeding, the latest installment of Eric Kripke's satire more than lives up to the series' reputation for keeping its viewers on edge. Yet, one of episode 6's most depressing inclusions is easily overshadowed by its mature content, as The Boys also introduces its own version of Spider-Man that is disturbingly realistic. Played by Dan Musso and known by the alias Webweaver in The Boys universe, the variant of Marvel's popular webslinger is featured early in Season 4, Episode 6, Dirty Business. A past confidential informant who is implied to have done favors for Billy Butcher, Carl Urban, in exchange for drugs, the character is briefly visited by Laz Alonso, who sedates him in order to steal his suit. The plan is then for Huey to infiltrate an elite gathering at Tech Knight's mansion in disguise, a plan which quickly goes wrong when Huey gets carried away by the eccentric billionaire's sexual fantasies, but The Boys Episode 6 moves on before it can fully explore all that makes Webweaver such a dark opposite to the classic comic book character. The Boys' version of Spider-Man is based on Spider's real anatomy. In terms of classic superhero origin stories, Spider-Man's modest beginnings rank among the most iconic. Possessing all the Golden Age simplicity and sci-fi whimsy involved in a clumsy nerd being bitten by a radioactive spider, Peter Parker's accident ultimately changes his life, and his subsequent powers are romanticized in order to fit Marvel's upbeat tone. In most of Spider-Man's movies and mainstream incarnations, Peter doesn't get the pincers or beady eyes of a poisonous tarantula. He gets agility, speed, extra senses, and sometimes even the ability to produce webs organically. Each of these powers gives Spider-Man the opportunity to strike his iconic web-slinging poses and stand out in a metropolitan setting, while The Boys' Webweaver appears depressing because his powers are modeled after an actual spider's body. Instead of firing webs organically from his wrists like Tobey Maguire's version of Peter Parker in Sam Raimi's 2000 Spider-Man movies, Webweaver's web hole is located on the back side of his lower abdomen, mimicking how actual spiders produce webs from organs called spinnerets also located in the lower abdomens of their anatomy. Similarly to how Webweaver's webs come out in a more liquid state before solidifying on Mother Milk's face, real spiders dry the threads of their own webs by twisting them with their 8 legs. This close comparison between the skin-crawling arachnids and The Boys' dazed informant introduces a level of body horror to the franchise, asking the viewer to imagine how horrifying it would be to see Webweaver crawling on walls while inhuman sinew sprays from his backside, but Webweaver's depiction in this episode is less terrifying than it is downright disheartening for The Boys' newest character. The Boys' Webweaver doubles down on this depressing in-universe trend. One of the most frequently talked about aspects of the Boys franchise is the show's unique approach to depicting superpowers. Infamously, the show's mature tone and gruesome aesthetic allow Kripke's adaptation of Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson's comic series to portray the realistic downsides of developing powers in the modern world. Characters who lose control, like Gen V's Marie Moreau, Jazz Sinclair, can find themselves accidentally murdering their parents or worse. Yet, while the Boys universe often underscores the dark implications of inhuman strength or speed, last week's introduction of Webweaver showcases the equally miserable possibility of developing powers that sound better in theory than in practice. While Spider-Man's heroics make it sound almost appealing to be bitten by the nearest radioactive spider, Webweaver's place in the world of the Boys imagines the problems with possessing an arachnid's honest ability. In contrast to Spider-Man's popular place in Marvel's continuity, The Boys' Webweaver is barely fit to be Tech Knight's sidekick, with Tech Knight not even being fit to stand on equal footing with the lesser members of Homelander 7. What's more, the inconvenient placement of Webweaver's web shooter would make it impossible for him to pull off any of the agile, visually stunning maneuvers associated with Spider-Man, demonstrating how his place in the Boys' superhero hierarchy is more disillusioning than inspiring. Furthermore, the practical problems associated with Webweaver's popular powers serve as the latest example of how Kripke manages to keep the Boys universe grounded, with past characters like Gen V's Emma, Lizzie Broadway, demonstrating the unforeseen impracticality of widespread comic abilities like shrinking. The Boys' most recent, and devastating, example of how common powers exact unexpected tolls on human bodies is on full display in Season 4, Episode 5, when Huey's dose of Compound V gives his comatose father, Simon Pegg, phasing abilities that wreak havoc on his memories. And while Webweaver's brief Episode 6 appearance certainly isn't as dark as Huey's traumatic farewell to his father, the variant's brief inclusion doesn't bode well for the rest of Season 4's most crucial characters. Webweaver demonstrates the plight of The Boys Season 4 informants. Apart from how both characters manifest their powers, The Boys' version of Spider-Man is noticeably worse off in his personal life as well. Not only does Webweaver's apartment appear dark, musty, and disheveled under sheets of cobwebs, but the character himself is clearly reliant on the drugs Butcher has provided on a consistent basis. Webweaver's mannerisms are slow and clumsy, he sounds disoriented, and nothing he says seems to suggest he possesses either the extreme intelligence or responsibility of Marvel's Peter Parker. Taken together, the state of disrepair that surrounds Webweaver and Butcher's past relationship with him demonstrates the lack of care that Billy takes with his superpowered agents, spelling trouble for Season 4 characters like A-Train, Jesse T. Usher. With Butcher currently battling his inner demons and Mother's Milk leading the team, the boys' current informants are in better hands, but Episode 6 proves that better does not mean safer. Huey's capture by Tech Knight and subsequent torture shows that Mother's Milk can barely protect his own operatives, and the need to utilize A-Train in order to save Mother's Milk after his panic attack only underscores the team's one-sided reliance on its primary soup informant. Since Webweaver's state of personal disarray represents the results of the boys' last superhero ally operating from outside the main team, Kripke's Wallcrawler stands not only for the inconvenient practicality of spider-based powers, but the realistic outcome of ending up as one of Vought's turncoats as well. With A-Train working against Vought's interests even more directly than Webweaver in Episode 6, the boys' sympathetic speedster is undoubtedly in even more danger, demonstrating how the knockoff's humorous inclusion at the start of Episode 6 carries lessons for the future of the season. As a variant derived from Marvel's classic Spider-Man, Webweaver pokes fun at the classic webslinger with powers painfully accurate to those of a real spider, demonstrating the boys' continued focus on the unintended consequences of mainstream powers. His brief stint in the episode also depicts the dismal implications of a prolonged relationship with Butcher's team, and since also neglects Webweaver after taking his suit, it's likely that Webweaver won't be the last side character to suffer from the government's dismissive attitude towards its most vulnerable soups.